Hello, and welcome to the Dave Isaac Podcast. I'm an artist, creator, human, and your host, Dave Isaac. Thank you so much for tuning in. Joining me today for our ongoing series, where we are dissecting the ins and outs of an artist's team, is renowned entertainment attorney, author, educator, Rolling Stone, and NPR contributor extraordinaire, Ben Mclane. Ben has been awarded dozens of platinum and gold plaques for his involvement in hit records including Katy Perry's Teenage Dream, 50 Cent's In the Club, Jay-Z's The Blueprint, and Nine Inch Nails with Teeth, to name a few, as well as hundreds of Billboard #1 and top 10 records and singles from the biggest artists in the world, including Ariana Grande, Eminem, Avril Lavigne, Drake, Rihanna, Justin Bieber. This only scratches the surface of his illustrious career. He also has a new book, The Music Business in 10 Easy Lessons, The Deal, which is available on Amazon. Ben, I am so excited to have you on the show. Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you for having me, David.
The main focus of this series is to help better understand the different roles an artist needs to fill on their team, what they do, and when they need them. However, I feel that sticking to the script for this conversation would be doing a bit of a disservice to your incredible depth of knowledge and understanding on the music and entertainment industry. So, to those watching and listening, if you are interested in learning about the difference of an entertainment attorney opposed to another specialty, the varying types of agreements that exist in our industry, or how much an attorney costs to negotiate or draft a contract, then I highly recommend you consider purchasing Ben's book. The paperback is currently $14.95 on Amazon, links in the description, visiting the article section of his website, benmclane.com, or type Ben Mclane into YouTube or Google because he has shared a wealth of information regarding all of these topics. So, without a further ado, let's get into it. First, I know that you have mentioned in several articles and videos that you recommend an artist get the biggest advance possible. Now, doesn't this make it more difficult for them to recoup, especially as that the money is only paid back through an artist's royalties, and we know the sales of music continue to decline, and streaming revenue, even though it continues to grow, pales in comparison to more traditional royalty revenue?
There's two reasons why I would say that. And I mean, if you're lucky enough to get an advance, because a lot of companies now don't pay advances, they're more about giving you a bigger back end, which is, if that's the deal, that's the deal. And sometimes that makes sense. But if you're a new artist, I found most artists need money. They need money to survive so they can pay their rent, so they can eat, so they don't have to flip burgers and they can focus on their music. So they need money up front for that so they can focus on their career. And that's better for usually the label or the publisher in the big picture, because then the artist can create the music that's necessary. And also, I think if somebody gives you a big check, I think they feel a little more obligated to follow through to make their money back, which kind of, because this whole business is based on marketing and promotion. Because you could get the biggest deal in the world, and then if the label doesn't market your record, nobody knows it's out there, and it'll just fail unless you on your own can kind of pick up the slack there. But that defeats the purpose of signing with a label. You want them to market and promote, but a lot of times they don't, or they don't do what they say. So I'm not saying there's any guarantee of it, but I think if the people have more skin in the game, they might be more apt to follow through and actually do the marketing. So, and then hopefully if your record does well and is promoted on streaming services and CD whatever kind of formats in vogue at the moment, although everything's moving digitally. When I first got in the business, physical was where it was at. And of course, now you have vinyl. With certain artists, you can sell for $20, $25 a pop. There's good money in that. But even if you're waiting to get paid back from a label, because yes, they're not going to pay you a royalty until they've recouped what they paid you in advance, you could go out on the road and maybe make money from when live comes back, touring and merchandising, and maybe there's other branding opportunities. Maybe you could become a podcaster, an influencer. There's a lot of ways you can make money, maybe separate from the label, but you actually use the label as a platform to create those opportunities. So I think get the money if you can. Now, if you're already successful or you don't need the money, which very few people are in that situation, then yeah, you can take a smaller advance because you will get your royalties back quicker, but that's contingent upon your record actually recouping through streaming, which takes a quite a bit of volume to get to that point. You know, and if you take no advance, you're supposed to get paid from record one or stream one. But you know, labels, remember, they also recoup things like marketing and promotion, or any video costs, anything that they do that they spend money on you. Usually, the contract's going to say they can pay themselves back off the top. So yeah, I don't know. That's why to me, it's like try to get some money if you can. Then you know somebody's really committed to you. If somebody's just not paying you, I don't really know how obligated or committed they are to the project, because they could sign up 100 artists, give them no advances, throw it all out there digitally, and hope the artist promotes it. But then they own the content because they have a contract, and I don't think that's fair to the artist.
And how does that kind of increase like the risk, or how often do labels go after artists to try and recoup that advance if if their record doesn't sell, if they don't get those
Oh,
streams?
they can't go against your personal assets. They can't make you liquidate your bank account or sell your car or sell your house or whatever. They can only recoup against the royalty streams from your records. So, or if they have a publishing deal with you or a merchandising deal with you, they could recoup against those things too. But they can't come after you personally. So you don't have to worry about that. It's not a loan. It's an advance against future royalties from the record deal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, okay, so for our next question, one of the most successful records of last year was written and produced in a bedroom. Billie Eilish. Um, with the decline of major studios and massive rise in professional home studios and production deals, it seems that a label's role is shifting towards marketing and distribution. Are they still relevant in the traditional sense? And is there some merit to staying independent and maybe working with a social media or branding firm to handle that role and retain the rights to your masters and creative control?
Well, you know, let's take the Billie Eilish example. She signed Interscope when she was quite young, like 13 or maybe 14, but I think 13. They actually developed her for a couple of years.
Right.
And if you look at how much they spent over the course of signing her to actually like breaking her and what it took to break her, they probably put a couple $1 million into her. So, you know, uh, obviously, if you want to be like her and be as big as she is, or Ariana Grande or Katy Perry or Rihanna or any of these mainstream artists, although she's an alternative mainstream artist, but she's still at a number one record. So to me, she's mainstream. That takes the backing of a major label. I've never seen an independent artist, strictly independent artist. I mean, you could say, oh, Chance the
Chance,
Rapper did
yeah,
it, but
he's kind
if
of
you
the
look
one in a million.
if
Yeah,
you look deeper, I think he had some backers. You know, it's not like he did it solely on his own. There's always some help there, you know, because you can't get to that level solely on your own.
do you
Current
mean
current,
yeah, or just like
yeah.
management and that type?
Well, he
Okay.
had management, but I think he had some backers, some financial backers, and you know, a lot of times, a lot of times labels will sign an artist and they'll keep it a secret. And the premise is the perception is this is an independent artist, but they're really funding it under the table. And then later they actually come in and say, oh yeah, then we signed them after they built their own buzz, where they really didn't build their own buzz. So I'm a little skeptical about how far you can go completely independent. I mean, you can do a lot on your own. The platforms are there, the tools are there. But I think to really get over the hump and become huge and make a lot of money, you do need to align yourself with a bigger label at some point, because then they can plug you into all the mass marketing outlets throughout the world, you know, to be global. So I've yet to see an independent artist really break out completely independent. I mean, it's probably going to happen because the tools are there, but of course a lot of it's how much you put into it. And I think you're always going to need a team too. I don't think
Of
anybody in their
course.
bedroom can just do it all. You do need a management manager, an agent, or a group of people that are kind of helping you with this. But the most important thing is great music, as we have discussed. You know, because I'm a firm believer. If you put something out that's amazing, and hopefully if it somehow gets through the clutter of what's out there, you know, people will discover it and you know, share it, and then it can become a hit. I'm still waiting for something to come become totally viral, so I mean, obviously videos do that with TikTok and stuff, but I've yet to see an artist do it, because even the Old Town Road thing started as a TikTok video, but then Columbia got behind it, Sony, and really, like, obviously put a lot of money into making that as big as it was. I don't know how big it would have gotten strictly on its own. It probably would have like hit a brick wall on its own. But that's not bad. I mean, you could be an independent artist and make 50, $100,000 a year and make a great living, and you could probably do that by monetizing content on your own. But then to be a millionaire, I think you got to align yourself with a bigger organization. But maybe it's not a label. It could be immediate. It could be Google. It could be Spotify. It doesn't necessarily
Yeah.
have to be a label. It could be a huge investor. So, or it could be some brand, but you just need some partner.
Yeah, I heard some statistic recently. I think it's something like the number of people earning six figures on YouTube has been growing something like 30% year over year for the last 30 years, or the last 3 years, I'm sorry, which is, I mean, even 10 years ago, it was just, oh yeah, that YouTube thing or making money online. It was kind of a joke, but now it's turning out to be a serious pursuit and
It
career,
it, it
really.
is. I just don't know, because I'm not a YouTuber. I don't have my own channel for like trying to build a platform like that. But I think to have a lot of followers and subscribers, and
Yeah.
sort of like it's like, how do you break as an artist? How do you get that many YouTube followers? I don't know. I mean, but obviously people are doing it, and I think a lot of times it's what are you talking about? Because we see these makeup artists or these cooks, people like that. They have more fans than the musicians do sometimes. So it really, if you can somehow, connect with an audience, and then hopefully there's not a million people doing what you're doing. You can, yeah, you can do well, and then YouTube is all advertising driven. So, but yeah, I think the leading, was I reading maybe a year ago, the leading YouTube channel was some little kid that was just like having rating toys, right? Did you see that?
Yeah, yeah, I know about it. Yeah, and
He's
they're
like,
making like $20 million a
yeah, and
year,
he's just
something like
he's just he's just
yeah.
an 8-year-old kid, and he's just
Yeah.
like, and people are sending him free toys, and he's just doing an online what a kid would do. And I
Has
guess
no
all the
idea what's yeah.
Yeah, and I guess all the kids like to tune in with their parents, and it's eyeballs, and it's all ad driven. So it's just, that's an example of, yeah, it worked for him, but how does the normal person make it work? I don't know.
Yeah, and I follow a lot of
That's
YouTubers and oh, sorry.
I'm just saying that's why I
I think
think
it glitched out. What were you
if,
saying?
that's why I think if you can get some kind of partner or alliance going, it's helpful. But it is possible to do it on your own, because we've talked about some examples of this to an extent.
Yeah, and I know there's, another kind of like Macklemore was very independent, but then he got, I think it was one of the first major label distribution only deals, which helped him explode with his first
Yeah.
record. Kind of going back a little bit actually about this kind of the label keeping things like a little hush hush, because there's a lot of talk about, even with Billie Eilish as an industry plant. And do you think that there's kind of some backlash like that as an artist, or that they're already just blowing up so big that it kind of is irrelevant
You
at
mean a
that point?
backlash against somebody like Billie Eilish at this stage? I didn't know what you.
Yeah, or just being like they were developed and was made in their bedroom and they kind of just did it on their own, and then come to find out they were funded, and I mean, it's
Well,
very clear the label spent a lot of money
I think it
promoting her, but
depends how it's portrayed in the media. I mean, if you're trying to deceive the public into thinking it's completely independent, and then later there's a bombshell where, like, oh, that label actually signed her 2 years ago and has been propping all this up, then it makes everybody look bad, like it's fake. But ultimately, if the fans love the music, maybe they get over that. You know what I mean? Because ultimately, like, her fan base I think is primarily teenage girls. They may not care about that story. They just love the music. They don't care how she got there. But so I think it's better to be authentic if you can. So by the way, I'm not saying any of that stuff really goes on. It's just we hear about it. But
sure.
I know for a fact it's happened. But and some artists probably you never heard of because it just didn't work.
Yeah, I mean, those rumors have been flying for a long time, I feel like.
Well,
So
well, this whole business, I mean, that's why when you turn on the radio for a top 40 channel, you're only going to hear artists that are on major labels, because it's controlled. the media is controlled by the majors pretty much. I mean, that's the way it's always been because they have all the money. So, that's why if you want to be that kind of an artist, I think you have to be willing to sell your soul in a sense. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just you have to play that game.
Yeah, and just trying to hold out as long as possible and get some leverage, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. Then you get a better deal and then that goes back to money and getting an advance because it's nice when somebody can pay you so you can actually make a living off your music as opposed to having to struggle all the time.
Oh, yeah. To move on, after having some conversations and kind of tying back into the TikTok and stuff, uh, after having a few conversations with some A&R and label executives and our conversations, they've mentioned the best marketing is nothing without great music. Yet we've all heard the stories of people who are doing covers or making memes and TikTok videos going viral and starting careers. Justin Bieber, Shawn Mendes, Lil Nas X. So my question is, should a new artist spend the time crafting and polishing their sound and image, or should they just jump into consistently generating and releasing new content, hoping something sticks? And then does doing the latter kind of cheapen the former?
Mhm. Well, it depends how quickly you want to get to the end zone. I think these days, if you can do covers and you do the right covers, you have to do it in your own way still. I mean, you have to have a unique voice, look, or something different. Otherwise, it's just like, when Whitney Houston was big, or when Mariah Carey was big, or when Christina Aguilera was big, there was all these girls with these great voices, but who cared? They were boring. They weren't adding anything to the equation. So, I mean, if you're going to do a cover, I think you need to somehow put your own unique spin, your own signature sound on it. But the good thing about covers, if you're doing an Adele cover and she already has 50 million views on that because it's a hit song, your cover is going to get seen probably by at least a million people just because of algorithms and recommendations and things like that. So you can get an instant following that way. But then I think you have to be ready to back it up with some of your own original material to show, hey, I'm a real artist. I'm not just a cover artist. But it might take a couple of covers to get to that point. But several artists actually have started that way quite successfully. And that's how you get on the radar of a label because they're just looking at your metrics. They don't really care because ultimately, if you're going to sign with a label, unless you're Beck or somebody like that, they're probably going to want you to collaborate with somebody anyway and kind of like create, some more mainstream music. So, it just depends what kind of artist you are and what your end goal is. But if you want to get a deal with a label, all they really care about these days is do you have a following of some sort? How do you create that? Well, if you can't do it with your own originals, which is difficult, you can do it through covers. And then once you've got a captive audience, then you start introducing your original stuff, and maybe that'll start to catch too. I don't know. Or you just I worked with a band a couple of years ago called I Prevail. It's a kind of a metal band, and they did a cover of Taylor Swift's Blank
Love that
Blank
song.
Space, and that yeah, and their version was a hardcore version, and they got 12 million views, and then they got signed to Fearless Records, and that's the only cover they ever did because other than that, everything was original, and their own original music's great. And the same. I also worked with a band called A Day to Remember, another heavy band many years ago. They did the same thing. They were already signed, but they did a cover of Since You've Been Gone, the Kelly Clarkson song. They did a hardcore version, and that became their biggest song. And it really broadened their audience. But they did it in their own way. So there wasn't anything you know, to be ashamed of because they were doing cool versions of those songs. So I think the business has changed in that sense where, at one time it would have been uncool to do a cover, and now I don't think people care
Yeah,
anymore.
it seems I mean, it's really about the song. I remember hearing something. The owner of the publishing for Since You've Been Gone also owns like Aftermath Publishing. And he came and did a conference somewhere, and he mentioned that, that song alone has paid out, twice as much as the entire Aftermath catalog. So the power of a song really seems to be.
Oh, since you've been gone. Well, I know Max Martin and Dr. Luke wrote that song. I don't know who. Maybe there's some other writers on it too that have a piece, but or maybe they. Who knows who had the publishing on that? But yeah, that is a big song. And I'll bet you if you look online, there's probably many versions
Yeah,
of it
exactly.
too.
That there's so many covers and people doing their own versions that it kind of just continues to live on. And a lot of that, like with a lot of
Yeah.
legacy artists. Yeah.
And that's what makes, yeah, that's what really makes money these days. I mean, that's even with these TikTok things. It's like if everybody's taking a snippet of your song and doing their own video, it's going to generate money, even if it's a little bit. It adds up, you know. So this, you know, having the digital world's opened up a lot of new possibilities to get paid. So that's only going to increase. You know, it's so I think we're in a good space here. You know, I think there's new ways to monetize things that didn't exist before. So, I mean, but ultimately, you know, if nobody's listening, then you don't make anything.
Yeah. Um, in our conversation from the other day, we discussed how music is really what pulls people in, but an artist needs to have something more to convert that interest in just a song into a connection with them personally. So we know that a marketable image is deeper than just a couple good pictures and a logo. What are some other key factors that go into creating and communicating an authentic identity that resonates and can impact culture?
Oh, well, to me, it's a visual, of course, but I think you have to have some vocal identity too, some production identity, because it's even like if you listen to ZZ Top, when you hear that guitar, you like that's ZZ Top. You know instantly. You know, it's just the sound. It's just the sound. You don't even have to hear the voice. It's just something you just know. It's like, hey, that's ZZ Top if you've heard him enough. So that's just one example. I don't know, some people might even know who ZZ Top is, but I can remember growing up, I was like, wow, that's so cool that that band would, out of all the guitars that sounds that are out there, they have their own unique guitar sounds, or Van Halen was the same way. So I don't know. I think having some kind of, you got to have some instrumental and or vocal, signature sound that goes along with your visual. That's all I can really say. And some consistency, I think, in the material. Now you could point out Madonna or David Bowie always change, but I think at the beginning of their careers they were a little more consistent. And then once they had some success, then they started jumping all over the place because they already had an audience.
Same thing with the Beatles. They very much stuck to pop music, and then over time began to evolve. And
Oh,
I mean that kind of brings me into a little bit something that I wasn't trying to hit on, but it is interesting that as fans, it seems like we really want our artists to evolve, right? If they just gave us the same record as last time, that we kind of say, oh, maybe they didn't really, I don't want to say put in the effort, but they're kind of just recycling the same thing. Yet if they go too far forward, we kind of say, hey, like you sold out, or you're trying to pander. It seems like it's a pretty difficult line to try and navigate, but I guess that's something also. Once you have some success, it's not a bad problem to
yeah.
have.
Well, I think that sometimes too, if a artist has a deep catalog and you follow their career, yeah, you're looking forward to what the next record's going to sound like, and then you're amazed if it's an evolution. But I think there's always some common thread there in all the records, and it's the vocals. You always know, or even with ZZ Top, it's the guitar sound. But then you could look at somebody like Frank Zappa, and every record he made was just crazy and insane, and there was no consistency whatsoever. But he didn't care. Now that's what people liked about him. But I don't know how many people can have careers like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think he's something completely in and of himself. Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing him like even on Crosstalk and predicting a lot of what's going on now with music, and also just like he up front put up everything on his own. And I know that he also mentioned like the only reason why I have lyrics is because people need them. If I had it up to me, I would just be making music and stuff.
Yeah, well, he was different, and maybe that was a different time. But yeah, I don't think he cared. He just made great music. But also he came from an era where major labels would still back really quirky artists, whether they sold or not. Where these days, I think everybody's more bottom line about something. Like they don't take a lot of risks. So that's why. But these days, you could, if nobody wants to sign you, well, that doesn't stop you. You can put your own music out, create your own audience. And in fact, I think labels, if you wanted to have a label deal like we talked about, expect that. They kind of want artists to sort of be business people to an extent, which isn't always great for the artist, but it's just sort of the way it is. You have to be a marketing guru and you have to be your own label at first, which, but it's possible. It's possible. When I first got in the business, you couldn't do it. if you didn't have some distributor putting your CD in the record store, well, you couldn't get from A to B because the internet didn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely. You really have to be able to do everything, or at least to get started and try and formulate something. That I think people have to see the train moving definitely before they're trying to hop on it.
I think so.
Now,
I think
now
so.
maybe more
Yeah, I
than
mean, it's
ever.
unless you're, like super connected, you're hanging out with the Kardashians or your dad's the president of the record company or something. Well, then maybe you get an in, and maybe, but most people, yeah, you got to do it the traditional way. I'm not saying there's one way to go about it because, a lot of people ask me, well, how many views do you have to have on your YouTube before a label's interested? I don't know. I mean, I think they just want to see some kind of things moving in this direction. Even if it's slowly, as long as it's moving in this direction and not that direction.
Yeah, I know. I've also heard the interest is it's not even necessarily like how many views, but how quickly, or how fast did something pop off. Like if it took you 6 years to get that million views, well, that's not maybe that interesting. But if it took you 6 days,
I don't.
you
Well,
know,
I was just reading. I don't know I can't remember what periodical it was, but it was a digital magazine. But they were talking about how all these video directors now are making videos in the COVID era just from their bedrooms, and all these videos are going up. But they took one of them. I'm sorry, it's a Florida based rapper. I can't remember his name, but they just made a little like video in like a barbershop down there in Miami. And this rapper is fairly popular already. I don't know if he's signed or unsigned, but in one day he had 1 million views on the video. They just put it online and it already had 1 million views. Like that, to me, it's like, how does that happen so fast?
it's amazing. I mean, like the organic reach, from what I understand, like on TikTok, is just incredible. People saying, I put up 5 videos and nothing happened, and I put up the sixth one, and now I have 40,000 followers, and then a week later, it's 100,000.
Hmm.
I know that I think the artist Youngblood also did a video. Basically, it's him in his apartment, and he had one of either a roommate or maybe a camera guy show up, and it was just single DSLR, and he's just running around his apartment and on the roof. And I've been looking a lot into video. I'm really interested in it, and there was something I watched on YouTube about a really well-known director who directed some Taylor Swift videos, and he was saying largely is that it's really about letting the artist be the artist and kind of just setting a background, and if you're really a star and you're really captivating, then they kind of just steal the show regardless of what the setting is or what kind of gimmicky video effects you're using. And I know with that Youngblood video, I watched it, and I saw the video and I was like, like it's okay, and like his guitar's like not plugged in, and I was like, he's just running around his rooftop, but he's it's just so captivating and has such a presence that you don't even really
So he's
care.
got quite a few views on that, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, I haven't checked, but I mean he's a very big artist in the UK, and he's done a lot of
Yeah, I've heard
collaborations.
I've
My
heard
brother
the
happened to
I've heard
be.
his Halsey. He did a collab with Halsey. I know that got a lot of airplay. So I've heard a couple of tracks from him, but I don't really. Yeah, I guess I did know he was British. Yeah, but he's somehow plugged into the zeitgeist of the because he's like hanging out with famous celebrities and models and all that stuff. So he's kind of like moved up the food chain like that. I mean, because I think that's sort of part of that game we talked about. Like you can be in your bedroom and make music all day, but I think you have to be able to play that game where you become like a publicity hound or whatever. If you want to, you got to be on the cover of every magazine and strip naked or whatever you got to do to get people to pay attention to you. Not everybody wants to do that, but it works for some people.
Yeah, and I mean I know that he's also doing stuff recently during this is where he's like just calling fans like on Instagram live, and taking a couple hours like every day to just scroll through people that are making comments and just hitting that button and connecting with them. And also even like Marshmallow is a way to get out there, right? There was like Cooking with Marshmallow. Have you heard about that? Like there's definitely a jump
I
now
haven't
to
I haven't
expand
heard
just.
of that, but I mean that makes sense because he's been pretty smart about all these great collaborations he's done to and he's got the image. But I remember, um, well, even like, I mean, again, it's just like Snoop Dogg. Snoop Dogg was doing a cooking show with Martha Stewart, on television. But it's just like
Yeah.
that broadened his audience to all kinds of new people that probably didn't know who the heck he was, that like Martha Stewart. So it's just like, but those kind of opportunities don't come along usually until you're at a certain level in your career. But yeah, doing collaborations is important, I think, for that's because I like collaborations. I mean, you have to do a great, you don't want to do a crap song or whatever, but all of a sudden especially if you're with two, you're plugging into their audience and their teams, and you have a much better chance of getting exposure with something. So I like collaboration.
Yeah, I think when they make sense, it can really be powerful. I mean, I know like Khalid and Disclosure, they had that song
Mm,
"Talk," which was just absolutely
so
incredible. I mean, that was more produced, his song that they produced, but I mean, it's absolute smash. I love that track.
yeah, no, I like it. That's how
Um,
I didn't really before Khalid, I always was getting confused with DJ Khaled. It's like, who's this guy? And but that song I really really liked. I think that's his biggest hit too. It's a good song.
Incredible. Okay, so moving on and taking a little bit of a shift is what's an area that you see artists, labels, other entities that consistently gets forgotten or neglected that you really wish they would focus more energy on?
Artists? You mean recording artists? Well, maybe just I mean quality of. I think quality is important. You do need to have quantity too, because we talked about that too, about having a consistent flow of content. That's kind of important and expected now when you look at somebody like Drake, for instance. Um, but he kind of set the model for that in my opinion, and it's worked. But but everything he puts out is good. It's really good. So it's like you have to, and sometimes maybe if you're creating things on your own without a filter, it might be hard to know. That's why it's nice to have a manager or somebody to help you with that. But um, yeah, but also kind of planning too. I mean, I think a lot of people just kind of do things willy nilly and they don't really have a strategy. So and you have to be willing to maybe move and pivot, because you never know what's going to happen. Even like we talked about, with this TikTok video might work when that one didn't. Well, if that one works and you didn't expect it, well, you have to be able to pivot on that real quick. And so you have to be diligent, and I don't know, and certainly can't be lazy, but that's for sure. I mean, I know personally, I don't ever want to work with somebody if I feel like I'm working harder than they are.
Yeah, of course. And I think even, bringing back to like Lil Nas X too, is that, obviously Old Town Road was so massive, but then what I think really kind of secured him is when he released Panini. It's kind of after you have that first one, it's like if you have another one lined up, now you're not just this one hit wonder, but I think maybe you start getting taken a lot more seriously as an artist and a writer. And
I think so. Yeah. I mean, although I think with him, unless he has another hit, he's probably still going to be thought of as a one hit wonder, because that first song was so big. Panini was, even though it was top
it's
10,
the
yeah, it
biggest
was
song in the
top
world.
10. It's sort of like that's not the one that people connect with him. But let's hope he has an ongoing career. I mean, because I want artists to succeed. But yeah, I mean, at this point, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what happens with him, because that song was so big to be. But also, it's weird. It must be, if it's like your first song and it becomes that big. It's like, where do you go from there? Because most people's careers are this way, not like starting at the top. It's very strange. Because even Billie Eilish, she might seem like an overnight success, but like I mentioned earlier, she was in development for quite a while, and they actually put out several releases, singles, before, kind of build her audience up before she blew up with that album. That wasn't her first release, like his.
Yeah, I know. Like, she had the EP with Ocean Eyes and another song on there, Hostage, which is just incredible. I mean, they are just so incredibly talented,
Yeah,
her and,
yeah.
and
No, it's nice
Phineas.
to have a brother like
It's
that, right?
unreal. Yeah, who's already like there and producing and has a manager and has his own stuff going on, and now you can just sit with your best friend and hang out and make music. It definitely helps to have somebody else to bounce ideas off
Yep,
of. I
yep.
think it's pretty hard in isolation.
Yeah, no, well, you're a creator, so you know. I mean, I mean, to me, I'm more hearing the end result. So, if I hear a great song, it doesn't really matter to me how it was created, but then I'll look to see, well, what's the source of this? Is this a band? Is this a solo artist? How marketable are they? Because all those are things that a label would look at.
Taking a little bit of kind of a sidestep too is, what's maybe a way outside of your friends and your family that maybe you can kind of reach out and get some honest like feedback or kind of see where you're landing with your music. Is there anything that you could suggest, maybe a place to start or a level that or an approach to, because I know I very much shy away from just trying to email somebody and say, hey, listen to my music. But at the same time, I feel like the stuff that I'm working on is definitely improving. It's getting somewhere, but it's hard when your friends and your family, whether they're trying to be supportive or they believe it or not, they don't necessarily have the exact same ear and expertise. And so they're like, yeah, this is great. It's good. Put it out. And meanwhile, I might compare it to a commercial release, whether it's production or sound quality or even just writing, and say, hey, like, I know I'm getting somewhere, but it's clearly not at that level, but I'm not sure what it needs or how to improve other than just continue to grind it out. So is there kind of maybe a way to start reaching out to some people in the industry with some know-how that you can build a relationship with and then get to a point and say, hey, would you mind checking out something or just letting me know kind of what else I can improve on, and not in sort of a sales pitchy, hey, can you put me on sort of way?
All I can suggest is if you do your research, you may find some, maybe it's a music supervisor, a sync placement person, a lawyer, a manager, a producer, an artist, or maybe an A&R person that have done things that maybe are in the same ballpark that you're in. So you've done your research basically. And then approach them in a nice way, and like you just mentioned, hey, can you, I've checked out what you do, and I think what I do might be a good connection, and maybe we could work together. Can you check out this one song? That's really easy because that doesn't require a big time commitment from somebody. And I think people appreciate the fact that you've actually, did your research and not just did a shotgun approach to that. But there's still no guarantees because everybody's busy. Most successful people are busy. They just are. So, although I've also found the most successful people, even if they won't get back to you themselves, sometimes I'll have somebody get back to you that works with them because they're not rude, they're professionals, and that's why they're successful. They didn't do that by blowing people off, because they don't know if you're the next Beatles. They don't know. They might as well check it out, but they're busy, so they have to do it in their own way on their own time frame. But I mean, that's all I can really suggest is, and obviously, if you know somebody that knows somebody and get a recommendation, that helps. Because if you can throw a name out there that somebody's already knows and trusts to it, I mean, I think that's the way most things get signed. Actually, it's like the reason this, Bill. Let's just take Billie Eilish. Who knows? But I'm sure, probably somebody knew, and that because she comes from a family that's been in the business. I think more on the television side. But they probably knew somebody that knew somebody, and that's probably why people paid attention to her in the first place. Because if you're just in Kansas and you don't know a soul and you're not connected to anything or anybody, it's really, really difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I also feel like that whether it's through conferences or whatever, there's a lot of places where these people kind of make themselves available. I feel like it's in any industry, really. It's even if you don't have any connections or contacts, that you can put yourself in a position where people are saying like, hey, I'm willing to offer, whether it's my expertise or information in a certain context, and to start building those relationships. But it definitely takes work, and obviously it takes a lot of talent in her case. If I think if somebody recommended her and they listened to it and
No,
it's
no, no.
terrible, I
But it
don't really
must have
think it's
been. I mean, again,
gonna
I
help.
know I don't want to focus on her, and I don't know that much about her. But I heard she was very young when she got signed, probably like 13. Most 13-year-olds I know are not developed or seasoned enough to really showcase themselves properly. Now, maybe because her brother was older and more polished, whatever they were doing was really good even when she was that age. But because a lot of times if something's too raw, the industry doesn't get it. I mean, I think in the way back in the day when the industry started, there were like people that just did things based on their gut, but now it's all driven by numbers. So most of these A&R people, and I'm not going to pick on people, but a lot of them are just driven by numbers. They're not taking any risks. They're not putting their name on the line. They're just like, oh, this has 1 million views, so of course we're going to chase that down. Well, anybody could do that versus, oh, this has a lot of potential. Let's take a chance on this. Let's develop this. I mean, that's the way the industry used to be, but I don't really think it's like that much anymore, regardless of what people say. I mean, you could interview a bunch of A&R people and they'd probably say, oh, yeah, we're developing artists, but that hasn't really been my experience lately.
Okay, so for my last question, I like to bring the focus back onto the artists themselves. What are a few similarities between artists that you know or have worked with that have contributed to them reaching the charts, selling out shows, and really most importantly, growing a passionate and dedicated fan
I
base?
think most of the time, for me personally, it never happens overnight. You have to be willing to put in 5 or 10 years. By the way, I can remember meeting Matthew Knowles, Beyonce's dad, at a conference I went to, just to meet him. But I remember I got to talk to him for like 5 minutes, and he's like, and I asked him, I'm like, how long did it take you to break Beyonce? And he goes, 10 years from the time he formed the first version of Destiny's Child when they were kids, 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever, till she had whatever. It took 10 years. So, of course, he's the dad. So he was willing to put that much effort into it and fund it, to get it to that point. But it's rarely overnight, even with things going viral. To have a long established career, I think it's a long process. So, maybe you get lucky and have a hit out of the box, but that's not usually. It's kind of like a step process. So you just have to be willing to put in the time. So I think having dedication is really important, and you have to have a tough skin, because in this business, no matter how great you are, including we've heard stories about the Beatles and getting rejected by everybody, that didn't get it. It's like you're like, wow, how could they not get it?
Mm-hmm.
But you'd be surprised. Most people are followers. They're not like out there breaking ground. So they're just following whatever's trendy. So I mean, you just have to be willing to accept no and not give up. I think, and then of course, ultimately, you have to have some great music and some cool image that connects with people, and then try to be professional. Don't blow it. Don't like. And I'm not saying you can't have fun in life, but some people kill their careers through drugs and alcohol. I mean, it's too bad. And then they can't ever recover from that.
Yeah, I've heard things. Oftentimes it takes extraordinary effort or being extraordinary to achieve something, and that in itself, extraordinary effort is just showing up daily and putting in the time over an extended period of time is already putting you far ahead of most people. Um,
Well, if you actually or show up on time and return calls and emails and be professional, I mean that is super important, and people will recognize that. But if you're trying to be a creative artist, ultimately you have to deliver the goods creatively, because we all know there's a lot of artists that won't get out of bed, or they're drug addicts or whatever, but they still have had major success because people love the music. So, but it helps if you're professional too, for sure.
yeah. Well,
Or even I can remember, when Guns N' Roses were big, Axl Rose wouldn't show up sometimes to shows.
yeah.
There'd be like 200,000 people in a stadium and he wouldn't show, that kind of create. Most people can't get away with that, but if you're that famous, you can.
Yeah.
But I don't know, most people would never even, they would never live their life like that. I don't know what it's like to be Axl Rose, but I'm just saying, most people, it's like you can't live that way. Usually you'll get fired.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm not sure it's much like that anymore. I think the tolerance for that type of stuff has maybe dwindled a little bit over the last few years. Seems like
It probably so. But I mean, when I read about some of these people doing that kind of diva-ish behavior, it's like, again, I'm not them, and so who knows what it's like to be them. But to me, it's just like, why would you treat your fans like that?
yeah. I am absolutely honored to have had you on the show. Thank you so much. I can't say it enough. I really appreciate all of your insight and your time. Thank you so, so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the plug of my book. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, everybody.